welcome to We Are Wool People. My name's Ailsa. Come sit next to me and let's talk about knitting.
There is only one of you, only one of me. There's a million of those who won't let us be, but they're not gonna.
I hope you guys have had a fantastic day. It's night time here. I'm under completely artificial light because everything has been literally out to get me today to stop me from filming this video. I'm having some technical problems with my camera. Every time the battery runs out, all the footage is deleted, and I don't know what's causing that. But I think I've worked out a workaround, so let's give that a go. I hope this version works. Right, I'm here to tell you today that I am the proud owner of a fully completed, self-drafted cashmere and silk cardigan that I made completely out of my head and yarn. So this cardigan, the inspiration for this cardigan, as you may recall, came from this jumper, which I've worn a few times on the channel. I bought this jumper from a shop a couple of seasons ago. It's a mohair jumper. It's got a V-neck, big balloon sleeves, and actually the feature of this jumper is that it's got a double knitted band up the centre of the jumper that splits and goes around the neckline. And that double knitted band in this commercially made jumper is actually seamed, and when you look from the inside you can clearly see that that one strip of knitting has been seamed all the way around the neckline of this jumper. I wanted to recreate a similar style to this jumper with this beautiful cashmere silk blend Laceweight yarn from Cardiff Cashmere. It was held double and the entire thing knitted on a 3mm needle, I think, and the bands, the ribbing at the bottom and the cuffs and around the neckband were knitted on a 2.75mm needle. The first thing I did when I started this project was I laid my target garment, if you like, down on a flat surface, and I took an awful lot of measurements and I made a sketch. Now don't judge me because I'm a terrible drawer. But there is the sketch on the right hand side of this page, which you can see there. And I took a lot of measurements around the waist, the distance between the waistband and the underarm, the circumference of the sleeve in its entirety, the depth of the V-neck, etc, 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 in order to give me what I wanted for my target garment. I then did a very small gauge swatch because I didn't want to waste any of this precious yarn on a gauge swatch, and worked out roughly the number of stitches I'd need to cast on to begin the project. I wanted it to be drop sleeve because this target garment is also drop sleeve, and I wanted it to be as easy as possible, so I started the garment from the bottom up. And I cast on enough stitches to go around the circumference of the project and knit it up to the underarms, where I split and proceeded to do the back of the project first. I added some short rows into the shoulder of the garment in order to give the shoulder a slant, the shoulder seams a slant, to mimic, you know, a human shoulder, because human shoulders aren't necessarily square. And I deliberately made the back of the sweater slightly shorter than the front of the sweater, even though I did add some short rows to raise the neckline slightly, in order for the seam, the actual shoulder seam, to sit slightly towards the back of the body instead of on the tip of the shoulders or in the front, to mimic a kind of European tailoring sort of style that I've seen on knits by Morka Knit and yeah, mostly by that designer and some of the other European designers. I performed a 3 needle bind off across the shoulder seam of this cardigan, which you can see, wait a minute, which you can see there. And that worked quite well, is nice and flat, and gives the garment quite a bit of structure across the shoulder. I then picked up around the dropped shoulder armhole, and I knitted in the round an appropriate sleeve length. I think I put some gentle decreases down the body of the sleeve in the underarm, at the underarm, but I then decreased quite rapidly at the very end to give the project a balloon sleeve. At that point I did in fact cast on 11 stitches across the bottom of the front and pick up all the way around the edge, and I did in fact knit a double knitted button band all the way around. And I didn't put any buttonholes in it because it was actually going to be a sweater like the one I just showed you, and my intention was to seam the centre of the double knit band up. I did a pretty good job, I think, of making those decreases look nice. I'll just show you up close where you can see the run of them down. Can you see that? Yeah, you can see how they look down there. But once I had done the double knitted band and seamed it up the centre, I tried it on, and actually it didn't really look that good. Between the double knitted band and the actual stocking stitch of the fabric, there was hardly any contrast, and so it didn't look like it had any proper finishing on the band. It just sort of, it didn't really look that good. So it was at that point that I decided to take that double knitting out altogether and replace it with a 2x2 rib, normal, everyday, standard button band, as though it were a cardigan. So there are only 3 buttonholes which I have added in the button band, and then I found these quite nice metallic look plastic buttons that do actually look quite good on the jumper. I was concerned that if I had real metal buttons that the weight of them might pull the line of the ribbing down because of the lightness and airiness of this fabric. And that last button there is a faux button in a funny place because it's actually never going to be used, and in fact is on the other side, if you get me. I just put that there as a bit of a decorative feature, and it doesn't, I don't feel particularly invested in whether it stays there or not. The entire cardigan was made in 7 balls of Cardiff Cashmere Prime that was held double throughout the project. So if you were to perhaps knit a similar gauge and use this yarn single, you would only use 3.5 balls. Each ball is 25 grams, so this jumper weighs, or this cardigan weighs, only 175 grams. It's actually insane how light it is and how incredibly soft and luxurious this fabric feels. As I've mentioned many times, this yarn was gifted to me by Cardiff Cashmere in collaboration with Yarnicopia, and Cardiff Cashmere is their focus yarn. What is that? Cardiff Cashmere is their focus yarn for the month of May. There are about 10 days of May left, so I encourage you to go over to the Yarnicopia website and have a look at the varieties of Cardiff Cashmere. Even if you're not going to buy any, it's really lovely to go over there and have a look at the varieties of yarn that they do stock and the beautiful colours that they come in. One thing I will say about a Laceweight project, that if you do hold the yarn single, even though Laceweight yarn that is made of luxurious fibre can be quite expensive, you do find that you actually, because it's got really high meterage per gram, you find that you actually don't use very many balls of it. And because these projects Laceweight projects, not so much stocking stitch cardigans, but Laceweight projects tend to take a long time. Therefore, there is a bit of economy in doing Laceweight projects and lace shawls and things like that, because actually the fact that they do take you a long time and that there is a lot of meterage in the yarn balls does in fact mean that sometimes they are actually quite good value for money. Having said that, Cardiff Cashmere is of course an expensive yarn, of course a highly luxurious yarn, but if I were to go and buy a cashmere silk cardigan, be it hand knitted or otherwise, it would easily cost me double what this yarn would cost at retail. This pattern is a very simple, very, very classic dropped shoulder V-necked cardigan with a 2x2 ribbed band, 2x2 ribbed balloon-like sleeve, and a 2x2 rib button band. And I'm quite proud of myself for self-drafting a pattern and working it out as I went and constantly measuring it against the target garment. And although I will say that every step of this project was actually quite fraught with doubt, with self-doubt, and at the end of the day, even though I'm really happy with it, I wore it on Sunday to the old bus depot markets in Canberra for their wool day. And even though I am really happy with it, and I just, you know, it's unbelievable against the skin and it's beautiful to have, if the truth be told, I probably should have made a Petite Knit April cardigan, which looks exactly the same and probably would have been more reliable in the shaping and the stitch count. So if you are after a cardigan that looks a little bit like this, might I suggest that you knit an April cardigan by Petite Knit, because the look is exactly the same, and I think she's probably a better pattern designer than me. But in any case, there is my beautiful Card of Cashmere Prime cardigan in the colour Christabel, and I'm absolutely delighted in this yarn and this project. I would knit another cardigan in this yarn in a heartbeat. It was a magnificent experience, top to bottom. So then, with that cardigan finished and off the needles, I then had a bit of excess capacity to cast on something new, and as I've been mentioning, I have been wanting the malites dress. Now, the malites dress is an epic knit, and the first thing that you had to do to start making the malites dress, apart from all those measurements, is you needed to cast on the stitches for the waist using Judy's Magic Cast On. And so, armed with my very small and not particularly useful swatch, I began by casting on, using Judy's Magic Cast On, a number of stitches that was in excess of 200 stitches. And I began to knit the first row. When I got towards the end of the first row, which is the setup row, I noticed that with Judy's Magic Cast On, what you've got is it's a provisional cast on, so you've got 2 knitting needles, and there are stitches on the top one and stitches on the bottom one, and you begin knitting on the top one to knit the bodice of the dress, and you leave the bottom ones on hold or on the needle until later when you come back and pick those up and knit downwards for the skirt of the dress. And as I was knitting the setup row on the first needle, the top needle, when I got towards the end of the row, I realised that my bottom needle had actually wiggled out of those provisional cast on stitches at that end, and I was left with just a loose sort of loop of thread, and I was unable to continue, so I had to start again twice. The first time they fell off the knitting needle, so I came up with the brilliant idea of putting them instead on barber cord. So I cast on my in excess of 200 stitches using the Judy's Magic Cast On again, put it on barber cord, knitted the setup row, same thing. And when I went to do it the third time, oh my goodness, I was really, really careful, but it was a huge pain in the neck. And I have since noticed that Sherry from Good Knits had exactly the same thing happen to her when she started to cast on the project. She wrote somewhere that this project took her 2 weeks to cast on, and I was a bit the same. Anyway, imagine my delight, when I began knitting on my 2.75 needle, and I'd knit about 5 centimetres of this dress, and I looked at the fabric, and I went, why does my fabric look literally nothing like my swatch? And then I went back to my swatch and noticed that on my long tail cast on edge, there are 2 threads on each end, and at my cast off edge, there are 2 threads of Isigo Trio, which means that this swatch must have been with the yarn held double, which I didn't remember. And so I had to start again literally for about the 4th time. So I did that, started again, and I knitted about 5 centimetres again, and then the pattern tells you to stop knitting and to recheck your gauge. because the pattern says at this point your gauge will have relaxed because you're working on a large project, and at this point you can probably check what your project gauge is going to be. And you guessed it, because I'm a loose knitter, my gauge was too big. The entire thing was too big, and the fabric itself was a bit too sheer for my liking. And so I didn't rip it out. Instead, what I did was I went back to the other side of the provisional cast on, and I slipped all those stitches onto a 2.5mm needle. Now let me take you back to something that I said in my most recent episode, where I said these exact words. I'm not going to knit a midi length dress on 2.5mm needles, because that would be insane. However, it appears that I am in fact going to knit a midi length dress on 2mm needles, indicating that I might well be insane, because that's the only way that I'm going to get gauge on this project. And how do I know that? Because when I got to my third false start, or possibly even fourth false start of this project, I went back and I spent an entire night making a large gauge swatch, where I started on a 2.75mm needle, and I knit a little bit of the yarn held single, and then I knit a bit of the yarn held double, and then I went down to a 2mm needle and knit it with the yarn held double and then the yarn held single. And I checked all of those fabrics and determined that the 2.5mm knitted area was the one where the fabric I thought was the best for this project. And I rechecked the gauge, and it's very, very close on the 2.5mm needle. The row gauge probably isn't quite as close, but the pattern definitely gives very specific instructions about what to do in those situations. And so I still didn't pull out what I'd already done on the 275, but I did start again on the other side of the provisional cast off on the 2mm needle. And you know I'm going to say but, don't you? 2.5mm needle, not 2mm needle, sorry. But you know what I'm going to say, don't you? But, there's a but, another one. The only 2.5mm needle that I own, because it's a needle that the only 2.5mm needle that I can find that's not misfiled is only 60 centimetres long. And every time I knit a row of this or put it down, it seems to slip off the needle, so I'm constantly picking up live stitches that are sitting there in my project bag. At which point I realised that I actually don't own a pair of point protectors, which I was surprised because I'm sure I've owned them in the past. But I remedied that when I went to the old Busto Depot Markets in Canberra on Sunday, where I bought some needle toppers, some stitch stoppers, and I'll show you those in a minute. But there is my progress on the malites dress. It's been a slow and staggered start, but I feel like I'm in a groove now and I'm going to keep working with it. My rationale for it not being much of a difference working with a 2.5mm needle as opposed to a 2.75mm needle is that if the gauge is the same, well then it's the same number of stitches, it's the same stitch count, it's going to be the same number of stitches on the 2.5mm needle as though it was on the 275, which, you know, there's not that much of a difference. The only problem is it's murder on your hands, and it makes using that Lion brand Nubu like a walk in the park. This is a physiotherapist's dream project, because I'd be keeping one in work permanently if I worked on this every day. I've worked this much on it in the last couple of days, and already the tendon in my upper arm and my hands and my knuckles and everything, I mean, I'm old, so I'm a bit arthritic, but everything is kind of killing me a bit. So I'm not going to work on this project every day. But if you're interested in the progress of this project, I'm considering starting a Malites Monday series on Instagram, and possibly using YouTube Shorts, where I just duck in and give you a quick project update on how the Malites dress is going, because this project is absolutely going to take me at least 6 months. I'm an Australian size 10, and there's no way that this is going to be a quick knit. But in any case, it's begun. The Malites dress, in spite of its very, very rocky start, I think we're getting there now. Although if I do have to actually start it again on the 2.5mm needle from scratch, don't be too surprised. Right, so then that gave me an opportunity, as I mentioned, for a new cast on, and I had 3 balls of, where am I here? I had 3 balls of that beautiful card of cashmere prime left over. And I did mention I wanted to see what that yarn was actually like knitted up, just held single by itself. The design of the card of cashmere prime is to be like a carry-along yarn, like a mohair silk. And as we know, many patterns out there at the moment encourage you to hold a strand of cashmere silk along with your actual working yarn to give a really hazy, airy and lofty, fluffy garment. So I am knitting the Dew scarf, which is quite a new pattern. A little bit further along, not a lot further along, I have to be honest. I actually started this again as well because there was a mistake in it. It was very kind of you if you didn't see it when I went like that in my last episode. Thank you for not mentioning it, but as soon as I was editing the video I was like, hang on a minute, what's that? Oh, that's not right. So I went back, started again. I've got 4 increase repeats to go before it turns into a straight scarf, and this is either a small scarf or a little bandana style thing. I'm not sure what I'm going to do with it next. What I'm going to do with it yet, but I'll just see how I go. I think those bandanas that I'm seeing a lot out there, I reckon they look a little weird. I reckon they make you look like a scout master, and that's kind of creepy. I'm not a fan of that much, but yeah, particularly if they're in red, I really do think they make you look like a girl guide leader. Oh wait, oh, a little bit of a nightmare there, sorry puppy. Let me have a sip of my tea. So since I knitted my neighbour her 100-year-old gift shawl, I really actually did enjoy knitting that gift, and it made me want to knit another gift, which is very out of character for me, I must admit. I must be getting soft in my old age. Anyway, I've got a friend, she lives in Queensland, and she's been after for a long time for me to make her a mesh style crocheted kind of pop over summery jumper. And she's really crafty herself and really creative, and I'm sure she'd be very appreciative of a handmade sweater. So she actually came with me to the little yarn store in Brisbane when I went and stayed with her a couple of months ago, and we decided together that she liked the Trapé sweater by Suzanne Muller, which is an actual crochet project, and I've seen it on a few of the YouTube channels. The inspiration for me making mine, in fact, came from a New Zealand YouTube channel, Lisa from Unwind and Knit With Me. She also owns an online yarn store somewhere over there, and she made a black one actually. It was really nice. So Jenny chose this colour of Fiddlesticks Wren, this really lovely watermelon colour, which I really like. And so I've got cracking on that, and there is the back of the sweater, and I have also begun the front. It's just a granny stitch 4 rectangle situation that comes together in a really boxy fit, so it shouldn't take me too long, and I'm quite enjoying that project because it's a DK weight cotton. It's really easy to crochet, and cotton is a little bit difficult on your hands, but nowhere near the nightmare that hanging onto those tiny needles is. So I'm enjoying that, and I hope to have that ready for my friend in the next month or two, or easy in the next month or two. So they're my finished object and my current whips. I will also just show you very quickly, on the weekend, on Sunday, Donna and I got the train to Canberra from Sydney, and we went to the old bus depot markets where they had a wool day. They have that every year in the second Sunday or second weekend in May, and as usual it was really fun. The vendors on that at that event are really fantastic vendors. There was a company called Three Mums Yarns that had their final trading day, which was a bit sort of bittersweet. They've been around for quite a long time, and I've known those girls for many years. Blackwattle Fibres were also there with their fantastic market setup, as was the Australian Yarn Store, which also fantastic, really big, comprehensive setup. They've got a lot of really beautiful colours in their yarns. And this Lush Corner was there, Handmade by Catkin was there, 1121 Windmills was there. There were many more. Alpaca farmers, alpaca yarn suppliers, Adagio Mills was there. Belisa Cashmere, which is an Australian cashmere farm, Australia Cashmere goat farm that's in the Southern Highlands. They were there too. And we were talking about how I once saw Nicole Kidman and her mother at their stall at the Craft and Quilt Fair at Darling Harbour. This was quite a while ago, but Nicole was actually holding the bags, and she said to her mum, "Well, can we sit down? I've got sore feet." And her mum said, "In a minute, just wait, I'm buying some cashmere," right? Anyway, it was so cute. It was such a perfect, ordinary, everyday mother-daughter moment. And Nicole did actually have some bodyguards with her, but they were standing a respectful distance away. And anyway, later on I had a conversation with her standing at another yarn store where she was talking about knitting a scarf for her husband, and she'd only just married Keith Urban. That's my literal lame claim to fame. The only one you'll ever get. Oh, the other one was that my wedding car had in the past been owned by Engelbert Humperdinck. Top that. Anyway, that's ridiculous. I bought this tin. This tin says cuts of lamb, and it's got a picture of a sheep. But I wonder if you can see up close what the cuts of lamb are. I don't know if you can, but I'll tell you. They are socks, beanie around the chest, fingerless gloves, cowl, chunky blanket, shawl, and an oversized sweater out of the belly of this sheep. I love this tin. It was really dear. Stupid. Small batch design, hand-poured resin from coastal Canada. It's come a long way, this sheep. And in retrospect, now that I look now, it's not a merino. Anyway, tin to hold knitting notions, of which I also bought some of those. I bought these really cute rose etched 3D printed needle stoppers. Oh, sorry pup. Which I'm about to put on my project. And I bought some more needle stoppers. Oh, they're rubbery, they're nice. And I bought these other needle stoppers from Handmade by Catkin. These are Frida Kahlo needle stoppers. They're cool. I like them too. Anyway, right now I'm going to put these guys on my malites dress. And I also bought, in order, because I've only got a 60cm 2.5mm needle, I bought another C-knit fixed circular in the 2.5mm in the bamboo, because also the metal on that linen yarn makes it really slippery and you've got to really grip on. So a wooden needle, a bamboo needle, will give me a tiny little bit more grip on that yarn. Okay. So of all the projects that I have on my needles, one's cotton, one's linen, and one is lace weight. So I really wanted to cast on for something that was a little bit woolier and a little bit thicker. And as luck would have it, my Sandness Garn order from Yarnicopia arrived today. Now I paid for this. No one gave me anything here. I paid for this out of my own money, and I bought this Cos yarn, which I'd never seen before, but I was interested in it. It's a 62% alpaca, 9% wool and 29% nylon blown yarn, and it's in this really beautiful brick red colour, and it's got a black, the net in the centre of this blown yarn is actually black, and the fibres that have been blown and wrapped around it, I don't know how it works, but they are the red colour, which gives this a really, really lovely shadow through it, like a real depth. And I am going to make with these a Frankie sweater, because it's really cooled down here and it's feeling quite wintry. So I'm looking forward to casting on for that Frankie sweater. And even though I do have a fair few whips, I don't think I'm going to deny myself the pleasure of that cast on. I think I might cast on for that sooner rather than later. Maybe even today. So, the next thing I want to talk about is my plans for the lace knit-along that I'm going to start in July. As I mentioned last month, I got so many fantastic suggestions on what to make with this lace weight yarn that I received, that it really piqued my interest for making a proper full lace project in July. Now that'll be in the height of the Northern Hemisphere's summer, and it will also be in the height of the Southern Hemisphere's winter. But I plan on hosting a lace knit along in July. So if you're interested in knitting a lace project, either with lace weight yarn or with a lace motif through it, preferably both, then drop me a line in the comments or send me an email to knitabulous@gmail.com, and I'll just sort of take a tally of the numbers. I think I will run it in Ravelry. I already have a Ravelry group that is named after the yarn company, the hand-dyed yarn company that I used to have 11 years ago, and it has been dormant ever since. Anyway, so I might rename that to We Are Wool People, and I might run the knit along on that group, because there's already a pre-made chat area there that we can all get to know each other. And if there's 2 people, I'll still do it, and if there's 10 people, I'll still do it. I don't anticipate there being very many participants, but we will have a chat and enjoy ourselves no matter how many or few of us there are. I think I'll also do a live knit-in night each month. I think I'll run it from, say, July, August, September, maybe 3 months. We'll look at it, finishing it on the 1st of October, beginning it on the 1st of July. And my friend Donna's going to make the Jules Genser, and I'm going to make either the smoke sweater or the KAL sweater. Both of them are really, really full-blown lace weight only knits, and so is actually the Jules Genser. And so I invite you to start looking at lace patterns if it's something you're interested in joining us with, and start accumulating your lace weight yarn. Now, of course, you can use any lace weight yarn you like, but I'm just letting you know that Yarnicopia are in fact having their Card of Cashmere month for the month of May. Their lace weight yarn is the Prime, and also there is the Brush Light Small. If you want to join my lace knit along, you can use any lace yarn that you have, either from your stash. You don't have to buy new yarn, you don't have to buy a pattern. You can use any lace pattern or any lace yarn. All you have to do is leave your name in the comments, and I'll be back in May with some lace weight recommendations, some more pattern recommendations, and we'll do all our planning in May and June for a 1st of July cast on. And I think we might have a cast on party, and we'll see how we go. Like I said, if there's 2 of us, we'll do it, and if there's 10 of us, we'll still do it. Okay, so that is it for today. So once again, thank you for watching, and I